justice for all. Ashley, would you do the roll call, please?
Okay. Chairman Sean Poole. Let the record show that Chairman Sean Poole is not currently at today's meeting. Member Randy Stout.
Here.
Member Lori Simpson.
Here.
Member Michael Ferez.
Here.
Member Ronald McDonald. Let the record show that Member Ronald McDonald is absent from today's meeting. City Attorney Nancy Meyer.
Here.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for October and November of 2024?
Motion to approve minutes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Comments from the general public? Bob Hubbard is first.
Sorry.
Hello? There you go. All right. Bob Hubbard, 7515 Grand Boulevard, Port Richey. I'm here just to bring attention to the zoning board, an issue that we have at the city that needs to be addressed hopefully sooner than later. That comes to signage, digital signs. We have some business owners here in the city that have had electronic signs, and they want to get them repaired according to our zoning laws. They can't even repair what they have because it's so outdated. We need to update it to LCD or LED, which is the new technology. If you look around, all the other cities have addressed this, and they have allowed that under a variance, which is something we need to address. If it's existing, they should be able to repair their own signs. If they have a variance allowable to more signage, they should be allowed to put in a digital sign, as long as it is something that meets the needs of the city. But this needs to be addressed. I would recommend that you can put the digital signs in with the existing variants. If they do have room, that they should be able to put in a digital sign. If not, possibly a special event 2-week window for a digital sign that they can possibly put out in front of their building. But it's something that we need to address and that we need to put into the zoning, so at least the business owners that have electronic signs can get theirs repaired and back online to help their business. Thank you.
Dave Mueller.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. At one point in time, this Planning and Zoning Board took up the notion of seawall repair maintenance. I don't believe it's ever been moved forward from that, but I would like to see something done on that and try to get that added to the agenda, because I've got a seawall across the canal for me that has failed, and all the land that's sitting on top is now spilling into the canal. And the hurricanes didn't help matters any, it just pushed more dirt in the canal. So we're contemplating probably a stormwater plan, and I think we need to get that on the agenda and start getting people to take care of their seawalls if we're going to try to do anything to maintain the waterways in this city. I appreciate you taking that up as agenda item. Thank you.
Okay, next we have comments from the chair members.
Today or about what day?
Anything.
Anything. Okay, well, I thought we had addressed the seawalls.
We never concluded. Yeah, the seawalls are coming back. As you know, what we did bring forth was not cared for. So the process has started over.
Okay.
So you will be getting something again.
Okay. Because I know we had discussed quite a bit whether getting something over to council regarding what building officials could do and
Yes.
couldn't do.
It's coming. I'm working with the new building official, and it's going to come back to you guys hopefully very soon, so it can go back to council. Then it can go to council.
And the same with the signs. We talked about that.
Yep.
But I don't
You
think
guys
we
are going to
finished
talk
it.
about signs on March 31st, right?
The board wanted to have a meeting with the public and businesses, so we scheduled that on the 31st at 6 p.m. And we're going to be starting the notice out to the businesses as well as the public. So that would be the first one. And then one would assume then the regular meeting in April, you would then start taking that discussion up further.
Can I ask a question of the first gentleman?
Yes.
Tell me again what the issue is. I guess you're a business owner yourself and you have a sign,
I don't.
but you know somebody that does.
Yes, there's business owners in the. First of all, one is like Catch's Restaurant. They've had a sign up on their building for 15 years. They wanted to just repair it, same size, a little bit nicer, but our zones won't allow, our codes won't allow it. Other businesses wanted to put like a digital sign maybe on their fence or in front of their building for advertising, and of course they're not allowed to do that. I do believe as a growth, as we're trying to develop the city, these should be allowed with some kind of variance, obviously, to help promote and bring notoriety to the city and to the business leaders of the city.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying that the existing sign, well, don't know
That's
what.
kind of a given. That's kind of a given. Yeah, you have an existing digital sign that can't be repaired because the codes won't allow it. But if you allow him to repair his sign, then obviously someone else wants to have an LCD or an LED sign, which is the new technology, then.
Have we changed the zoning, the signage laws recently?
No, so the issue as it relates to Catches is they are in the waterfront district, waterfront overlay district, that prohibits that type of signage. So you can have that signage in other parts of the city, but you can't have it in that district. And so eventually there'd be two different pieces that have to be done. One is we have to redo because our sign code is very old. It doesn't address the newest technology as it relates to LED. So we want to update that to make it, I guess, to a certain degree easier for people to do it, but still conform to what the community wants it to look like. And once you have that changed, you would have to go back to the waterfront overlay district and remove that prohibition. So there's actually two things that need to be done there.
Maybe we can address that at the meeting about the signage that's going to be scheduled, right? About signage.
Yep.
And if you know people at Catches, I would suggest they find out when that is so they can share with us what they're trying to do.
Right. And just I planned on sending that to the Lowe's because I know that this is an issue that affects them, and I had talked to them about that.
As far as they're concerned, they just want to replace what they have.
Right.
Whiskey Joe's would like to have a little digital sign on their board that you can read, just not on 19, but on the road in front of their business to promote some of the activity that they have going on there, as well as Hooters when they reopen. So they can all come down here, but I'm here just to speak for most of them. It's just a common sense issue. I hope we can just put something together with a variance for those digital signs just to keep up with the times.
Right. And that's what we're in the middle of doing, of upgrading the guidelines on the signage. So I think if they come here and you can tell us
Okay.
what they're trying to do, we can try our best to make that happen.
Yeah, Matt has talked to him. He's kind of aware, but yeah, thank you.
Matt, do we have, has staff looked into other places? And 'cause I know there's a lot that goes into signage.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that digital signage, specifically because of how bright it can get and how distracting it can get in traffic, the DOT has a lot involved in that. And we already have all that data so that we can discuss all that on the 31st.
So I've started putting together a collection of different codes from across Florida on that. Because that one, I mean, there's there's a lot of issues.
Sure.
Right. That one is a little bit more technical because then you get into the brightness and all this other stuff that you don't get into a regular sign.
Right.
And so
Angle
that will be a
incidence
little bit more
yeah.
technical.
Because I know DOT is really big on what colors can be displayed where and when and how bright, and there's a lot.
And that-
there's a lot that goes into
And
that.
that becomes an issue there because it is right on top of 19 and so there's a lot that
Okay.
we'll be working through. I wish I could say it's going to be easy, but it probably won't be.
Why start now?
Yeah.
Just to finish up, I have no comments, so now we're on to the agenda.
And
I'll
I
let Sean
just-
take over gladly.
I just want to let the record show that Chairman Sean Poole is now present for today's meeting.
Yes, thanks. I apologize, everybody, for being a little late this morning or this afternoon. That's my day. It's this morning still. So, okay. So, yeah,
Up to Tammy.
pardon me. Okay, to Miss Tammy,
Okay.
you have the floor.
Okay, I think we're all set. So my name is Tammy Vrana, Vrana Consulting. I serve as your on-call city planner. And today we're here for a public hearing for the comprehensive plan update to bring it to a horizon year of 2045. And this is based on a 2023 evaluation and appraisal review that was conducted by the city, shared with the state, and then the state said, okay, now you have a year to process these comprehensive plan updates or amendments, and that's what we're doing right now. So the purpose of the public hearing is to review particularly the goals, objectives, and policies for certain elements of the city's comprehensive plan for which we found some inconsistencies with the latest state statute. Most importantly was the conservation and coastal management element, because the state required that all include peril of flood policies, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. We also have some minor tweaks to the transportation, infrastructure, intergovernmental coordination, and capital improvements elements. The hearing is also, along with your discussion and consideration of the goals, objectives, and policies, is to invite public input, and then finally to make your recommendation to City Council as to whether the amendment should be adopted, denied, or adopted with modifications. So we're going to start with the conservation and coastal management element, which was a complete rewrite of the element in your comprehensive plan. So when we're looking at the goals, objectives, and policies today, they're a complete replacement of. So we'll do a strike and replace of those policies. And I know we've gone through I think we've had 2 meetings where we've gone through these, so I'm not going to go through in great detail, but I'm going to talk about each one of the goals and the objectives therein, just for the purpose of the viewing audience. The first goal is regarding natural and cultural resources. The objectives under this goal include ecosystem preservation, habitat protection, air quality, water conservation, energy conservation, cultural resources protection, and waterfront uses and public access. And these are objectives that are identified within statute for coastal communities and all communities relative to conservation to include in our comprehensive plan. So I'm going to touch on just those policies that we had discussion items at your last workshop. But if anybody has any additional questions about other policies, then just let me know. So we're going to start with policy 1.1.5, Category 1 wetlands, which identifies how those wetlands are identified through criteria. The question was there was a question about the last item, number of wetlands of any size that are providing critical habitat for federal and or state endangered species would, by virtue of that, be considered a Category 1 wetland and have those kind of higher standards for protection. I did look in the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan, and it is a kind of a standard way of identifying a Category 1 wetland, and so Pasco County has just showing that another community has that.
Do we have to have it in the best of?
Well, I guess I think I would suggest that it stay within there, just because those particular pieces of your city, if they even exist, we don't have a sense of if you have any wetlands that have habitat for those types of protected species. But if you did, you probably would want to have some protections on them. I would think, in my opinion, as my professional opinion.
Just kind of jump ahead a little bit, and I don't remember what it was, but later on, it talks about requiring a field inspector to determine if there are any endangered species out there.
Yes, there's
And
a requirement for.
It says for a 5 acre or larger property. So if you are under 5 acres, not required to have somebody determine if they're there. Right? So,
That's right. It would, I mean, unless some other information came to light, but if we're not going to ask a developer of a property less than parcel or 5 acres to do a biological survey to determine that.
sorry.
It just, I think, so while this relates to what our comprehensive plan requires, what you have to remember is there's going to be another set of eyes looking at any development that happens. And so I'm guessing SwiftMud's going to be interested in wetlands and may already know that an area that is going to be developed has potential for that species that's going to be there. So us eliminating this out of our comprehensive plan isn't necessarily going to take the onus away from someone doing that review. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand if you took it out, it's not magic. No one will ever look. It will happen.
Okay. The next policy under discussion is 1.5.5 regarding urban heat islands. And there was a question regarding the suitability of green roofs and living walls in Florida because of the potential for water seepage and termite infestation, which is a really good point. Those types of technologies, and these are all Florida examples, would require that the building be constructed to be able to accommodate that type of technology. So if somebody came in and they wanted to plant plants on their roof, it would be, and they didn't do anything special to protect that building, it would be at their own peril. But I don't think that's necessarily something that, the city would, if you're not getting a building permits just because somebody puts plants up on their roof, which is not really a green roof. But certainly the city would look at that to see if the structure was going to be a safe structure in terms of building. I also want to say, let's see if there's another one. The University of Florida has, and this is actually from them, they indicate the benefits of perimeters and living walls. And also, interestingly, Hillsborough County allows some credit for stormwater if you have a green roof. So, any additional thoughts on that?
So I would get a credit if I don't blow the leaves off.
Do you have a stormwater standard that you're trying to meet?
Well, and by definition, these are in the building code. So proper use of a green, it's not just a matter of letting your gutters grow with stuff in them, or letting the leaves collect on the roof. To build these requires a tremendous amount of engineering, because it has to have water runoff. It has to have tapers and grades, and there's so much that goes into it. We looked at doing it on the house, and it was not cost effective at the time for the way that we were going to do it, for the benefit that we could get out of it. But there's a tremendous amount of engineering that goes into how to do this and how to do it properly. The building would never let you put a roof on and just go, hey, we're gonna throw some shrubs up there.
And do you have code provisions that if somebody has a tree growing off their roof just because the seed dropped there at one point, do you have something that says, hey, you need to, like a property maintenance code? Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd be
all kinds of different things like rain gutters.
Yes, for sure. Maybe some little animals too. Okay, I'll share that story after the meeting I have with the gutters. Okay. The next goal is related to coastal resiliency, and this entire section, the goals, objectives, and policies, in this area are pretty much speaking to that peril of flood. So how can you make your community more resilient in the face of worsening storms and sea level rise? The objectives include risk assessment and mapping, so keeping on top of what the risk is, public infrastructure, natural protection, land planning and regulation, building standards, and risk financing and insurance. So the first policy that we had under discussion from last time relates to infrastructure retrofits and upgrade policies. Let me make mine a little bit bigger here so I can see. Hopefully you have this on your screen. This one related to, now I'm losing my train of thought. Develop strategies for retrofitting or upgrading critical, okay, so previously this was, okay, let me start back up. Develop strategies for retrofitting or upgrading critical public infrastructure. Is this, I don't think I have this right. Critical public infrastructure, something about flood, in flood resilience. Sorry about this. Vulnerable areas to ensure structural integrity and seamless integration with surrounding properties. This related to your comment. It's coming back to me now. So we talked about what happens in the future when the city goes in to elevate some roads or streets within the community. How do we do some transitioning to the adjacent properties? So what this is saying is that, and this is not telling you how to do it, but it's simply pointing out that that is a need within the community. So you need to develop strategies that include or not, but not limited to, stabilizing, armoring, or elevating roadways, bridges, and water utilities, implementing terrain modification strategies, so moving the land around to elevate land, improve drainage, and enhance flood resilience, expanding stormwater management capacity through improved drainage systems, green infrastructure, and nature-based solutions, and strengthening water treatment and conveyance facilities to withstand flood impacts and main service continuity. So as I went back in, I kind of reorganized things a little bit. I wanted to be able to call out about stabilizing, armoring, and elevating, and then going on to say that by implementing terrain modification strategies, that you could work with elevating land, drainage, and other such things to improve flood resilience. So that's changed enhancing to expanding because I thought that was a little bit more descriptive. And then upgrading I put to strengthening because I thought that was a little bit more not restrictive but descriptive. Do you think that this, and we have another one coming up that also works with what I think it's a new policy.
I like that.
Anybody else have any comments on that? Okay, so the next one is policy 2.2.5 regarding expenditures in the coastal high hazard area. And prior to this, the current text, which I believe is already in your comprehensive plan, is to avoid public infrastructures for new streets, sewer, or water line extensions or expansions within the coastal high hazard area that could encourage higher densities in areas vulnerable to major storm events. And so the proposed text is essentially to kind of keep that line of thinking, but to actually stipulate what sort of infrastructure investments would be acceptable or would be acceptable. So that would include infrastructure that supports the safety of life and property, such as traffic and pedestrian signals and signage, streetlights, fire hydrants, etc. Underground utilities infrastructure, maintenance, repair, or replacement of existing facilities, hardening existing infrastructure to avoid, mitigate, or reduce the potential for future damages from hazards such as storm surge and sea level rise, restoration or enhancement of natural resources or public access. Two, address an existing deficiency identified in the comprehensive plan, new or retrofitting of existing stormwater management facilities for water quality enhancements of stormwater runoff, management of sewer system inflow and infiltration, or the expenditure for a public facility of overriding public interest to ensure public health, safety, and welfare. So essentially, being able to go in to those systems to make them more resilient, so that you can do something, because most of your area is a coastal high hazard area, so it would be very restrictive to say no public infrastructure improvements or that could potentially lead to development, because that's essentially what, you have a large area that's in the coastal high hazard area. Is development going to happen? Yes, it is, but we need to continue to keep infrastructure not only in good repair, but also to anticipate what sort of new technologies could come into play to make those infrastructure facilities more resilient and to withstand the threats.
Well, the city has this position here to avoid any new expenditures on the way, I guess what it's saying there, right?
So we would strike that, and we would use the text in red.
You're striking.
To strike that.
Okay, good.
That's the current text. Because it was a little too, it was a lot restrictive, because so much of your area is coastal high hazard. You are a redeveloping community. There's a lot of aged infrastructure. You need to be able to keep things in good repair, and also advance new technologies to make sure that you're protecting your investments.
Good.
The next one is policy 2.4.2, multi-layered best practices. And this is where we incorporated some of the terrain modification language. I looked in the Treasure Island. What was the report called in Treasure Island? Elevate TI. And there wasn't anything to directly pull from that, but I kind of synthesized it. So essentially, we would modify this to incorporate best practices for mitigating future flood events in the Land Development Code. So this would need to be followed up with amendments to your Land Development Code, such as increased setbacks from floodplains, erosion control requirements for waterways, stormwater management policies such as underground storage systems, bioswales, rain gardens, floodable landscapes, and tree preservation, standards for impervious surface, regulations for terrain modification, including grading and elevation standards, responsible fill use, and compatible requirements to prevent adverse water displacement, mitigation measures for properties adjacent to infrastructure elevation projects, including requirements for driveway modifications, grading adjustments, stem wall installation, and other drainage solutions to prevent negative impacts on accessibility and stormwater flow, and requirements for elevating structures above projected flood levels. Some of this you're already going to have in your code, but it's a spot in there, and really was a place to kind of have all these multi-layered strategies for protecting property. Do you think that hits the mark, or would you suggest any terminology changes?
No, I think that covers it. It opens it up for us to build codes and work with building department to actually come up with a plan that suits the community. It's hard to be more specific because we don't have a roadway elevation plan yet.
Right.
So until we have that, this gives us enough broad yet clearly defined that these are goals.
Kind of the high points.
We want to do this, and this sets the pace for. We want to be able to go in and say we want to build these things out, and we want to build codes that will do the work, so that we can do it intelligently, as opposed to just having at some point in the future we might need to do that, so we'll deal with it then. This, I think, gives us at least a framework to build on, so that we can sit down and workshop how do we deal with flooded roads in the future, and this gives us a reasonable frame, I think.
Leave space in it for interpretation based on how technology will change as well.
Yes.
So I'd say it's perfect the way it's written.
Okay, great. So the next goal relates to emergency preparedness and evacuation. The objectives are emergency preparedness and emergency evacuation. There was a question regarding having overnight any properties that offer overnight accommodation facilities, that they must submit an approved hurricane evacuation plan for all guests. I would think that this is probably a good thing to aspire to, because we do have chances that people could be in town that don't necessarily know about what the risks are. So what this does is it ties it to the building tax receipt process. So let me read the replacement. To enhance public safety and ensure efficient emergency evacuations, require all overnight tourist accommodations to develop and maintain an evacuation plan outlining procedures, emergency contacts, shelter locations, and transportation options, and communicate this information to guests upon check-in. Incorporate compliance with this requirement into the city's business tax receipt process. So maybe that's a simplified approach to it, but maybe somebody who knows more about your business tax receipt process, and if that would be an appropriate way to regulate. I mean, it's pretty much more informational. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of enforcement on this, but it is kind of a responsible practice for somebody who is bringing in unknowledgeable, potentially out-of-town guests that could be, caught surprised by something that by a storm that comes in. They happen pretty quickly sometimes.
I'm getting a look because I own Airbnbs in the city. That's why.
Yeah.
Help us understand.
Well, so I have a question because I haven't done the Airbnb thing. My wife books all that. I don't book it. Is there a place within Airbnb and VRBO with the booking sites for you to have documentation, to provide documentation to the clients?
The simple answer is yes. So many of the hosts themselves do not do that.
Right.
As somebody who lives in said area, I did incorporate it in ours. So if you click and you log into mine, when you get your check-in instructions, it'll tell you you are in a coastal area due to the fact that, as such, you have to be advised that there is the correct way to get out of the city if need be. So yes, we do we address it in my personal ones. Yes.
And the reason I ask is because obviously this begs the compliance and enforcement. We're probably not going to have an inspection process where you go around and verify that they've got an evacuation plan posted in the building. But it would be fairly easy. We're not talking about a lot of how many Airbnbs do we really have within city limits?
It could be an
100?
encourage.
Oh, I'd say a couple dozen, maybe.
A couple dozen.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that if it's something that we require as part of their, I know we've talked about in the past having something where if you're going to operate an Airbnb or a short-term rental, then you're going to have to register it in some fashion. As part of that registration process, part of what you sign would say that you're going to post it in your listings that we have, and I know that the PPI board is working on a whole bunch of information about how to evacuate, what that means, where do you go, all of those things. They're working on signage and all sorts of stuff there, so maybe there's an incorporation there.
Well, so I'm thinking probably the easiest way to make it uniform, correct, because what we don't want is individuals making up their own.
Right.
No, it's open to interpretation. You don't want that at all.
Exactly. And so my thinking with this is that the city would create kind of a 1 or 2 page, hopefully 1 page, emergency evacuation sheet. And
Things you should know.
And right. And, probably as part of that process for getting your business tax receipt for a short-term rental, there's a statement that, yes, I agree that I'll have this posted somewhere visible within the rental. That's my thought. That way it's uniform. We know that. Now, are we going to go there other than maybe the first time that you register with that? Probably not after that, but the first time we will have.
So that's why I was thinking.
So Alachua County did the same thing. So I have an Airbnb in Gainesville, for instance, and same thing. When I registered it with Alachua County, they have, we have this form you can come pick up. And I was like, well, that sounds like pretty vague. So I went and picked up the form for them, and I said, what do you want me to do with it? It just has to be in the house. I'm like, that doesn't really make any sense. Mm-hmm. And it's because they weren't taxing and managing their Airbnbs directly through VRBO and Airbnb together. So it was a responsibility of the homeowner to manage that process. Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't really work, right? If I hang something on the refrigerator, it may not be there the next time because the next person just rips it off. So I asked the same exact question, and their response to it was, well, we don't know what best way to do it. I'm like, well, what do you do? I said, well, I'll tell you what I do in Port Richey. And he said, what do you do? I said, it's listed in my check-in instructions. Oh, perfect. So then 2 weeks later, I got an email. Now they send it to everybody. We just copy it, place in your instructions, it's good to go. I use Logify, which is a software to manage, but it puts it out to all the different ones, whether it's booking.com or any of them. So it's all consistent that way. Because the ability to check on it, even from a host standpoint, I go to my house in Gainesville only once every 2 months. So I can't keep track of what they've done there, even if I have staff that they're to manage it. Doesn't pretend it's going to be done. So I do like that idea.
Yeah. Well, and not to place more on city offices, but if we wanted code enforcement to be able to verify it, it would be something they could, if we're only talking about less than 50 of them quarterly, they could just log into everything that's in Port Richey and see that those documents exist.
The city of Port Richey doesn't monetize it anyway, correct? We don't charge a surtax in the city.
No, we don't do a business tax on it.
I know that Pasco County gets it.
Do you have to
Because
come every year to get a new?
managed through Airbnb.
We are going to be doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I would tell you, it was a disaster from Alachua County because I had to physically go through and count all the ones I had from a county, provide them that data. Then they would send me a tax bill separate every single month. I was always in arrears because they never would get the information done in a timely manner. They're charging all these fees. Like, why don't you just call VRBO and Airbnb? It's easy. You add it to it, you click, and it takes 2 seconds. As soon as they did that, they did it just starting January 1st. It's been a smooth process ever since. So, and the city should be doing the same thing because we are going to continue. We're in such a transition between my business and his business now. I think that half the waterfront properties we have, especially if they're ground floor, in the next 12 to 18 months are going to be switched to rentals because we're losing our residents because of it. Yeah. And investors are buying them up because they see the grand scheme of what they can make money-wise. Yeah. And because of that fact, we're missing the tax revenue we could be getting here in the city. I have no qualms with the city. You tell me it's going to be 2% or 5% of my rental? Great. I don't pay it anyway. It goes, I pass it on to my client. The guests gladly pay it. So I think it's something we're just missing out on for sure. And if we can incorporate it into the business tax registration or whatever we're going to call it, that's a wonderful way of doing it. Because I know quite a few of the same hosts in the city. I mean, Lori's a host too. Hers is more of a long term, but it's the short term people we have. We would gladly register for them, but we don't because there's no way to do it currently. So we just got to do our thing.
Well, I think registration also gives you the benefit of everything's above board. Like, this is solid. The city knows about it. The community knows about it. Like, because I think there's people that are like running some on the down low behind, this because they're worried about getting caught because Pasco County's they don't know the rules. Well, I think us saying that this is something that we want you to do, we recognize it as a viable business in the city, but we want you to do it right. And here's one of the things that we want you to do. We want you to post this so that your people that are coming in, your tourists that are coming in, are safe because they are renting through the middle of hurricane season.
And it's going to make your job easier too in the future because eventually what's going to happen is we don't want to put ourselves in a position like Treasure Island. They know people in Indian Rocks Beach. They have people standing at city council meetings screaming that they live in this community, they live here for 25 years, and now there's 4 Airbnbs around them that nobody's managing. Right. And they don't even know that they're Airbnbs because nobody's told them they're Airbnbs. And I think we're going to be, if we're not careful, we're going to be really quick to have that happen where we're at. I mean, when I put mine in, it was one of the very first ones in the area. So, I mean, Lori's you've had yours for a long time, right? Your rental. So, but there's most of them, when we started doing Airbnbs, it was at the end of COVID when we started doing them because they were all good long-term rentals here. So
the only thing that I'll say, maybe we don't want to put business tax process there because there are bills coming forward to eliminate that.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay. And I don't know if we want
short-term rental registration process.
You got registration process.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, people are cheap and don't want to follow the rules. So if something like, I'm not paying that, right? No, we encourage you to be an Airbnb owner in the city. We encourage that. We want the revenue from it as well. We want to help manage your process for you, help get your guests out safely if there's an issue. We just need you to register. I don't care if there's a cost associated. We can make our money back when we tax them for the deal. right? So don't even charge them to register. Just get the property registered, and then we know the people that are visiting our city are safe. So,
Well, you can motivate them to register because the folks that were in Pasco County before Pasco County's rule went into place were the only people that are still legally allowed to operate
correct.
in that circumstance. And everyone has to assume that at some point we will hit a threshold within the city where we're like, okay, that's enough. And so if you're not registered, when we hit that threshold, then you're going to lose your rental income. That's a good way to get them to register it now, and then that helps us with compliance to make sure that people are safe and everything's compliant.
Well, it's a beautiful thing too. When they sell those properties, then because it's a 1-to-1, they sell that property, then somebody else can. You're next to the list, you can have one. So, but you're right. You kind of manage that process too. You don't want it to be a town full of rentals either. I don't want it to be a town full of rentals in my neighborhood.
So what I'm hearing is to keep the proposed tax as is, but to replace the business tax receipt process with the short-term rental registration process. But actually, this is relating to all tourist accommodation. So this wouldn't necessarily just relate to.
How about tourism accommodation registration process? Because hotels have to register with the city, correct?
What if we just strike that last part? What if we don't even refer to the process by which this would be implemented?
That's good. Just delete that last sentence.
Okay. So the fourth goal is post-disaster redevelopment. This would be post-disaster. So those things that you do to get your community up and going and then also redeveloped over time. So the objectives are post-disaster recovery, post-disaster repair and redevelopment, and the post-disaster redevelopment plan. So for this policy, 4.2.1 related to a building moratorium. And so it was felt that moratoria was probably a little bit too strong in this particular case because from the experience recently, there was just a process that you had without having to shut everything down. So the proposed language is, after a major disaster, the city council shall adopt an emergency permitting process to expedite critical repairs necessary for public safety while ensuring compliance with federal regulations and requirements, period. The other things regarding damage assessment, explore and redevelop, those are wrapped up in other parts of the policies relative to the post-disaster redevelopment plan. So they really were kind of redundant with some other things, and the fact that we're not thinking about moratoria, but more so just having some type of a permitting process that's sensitive to what people are experiencing at that time.
Much better.
Yeah, I think that leaves room for the building department and the city offices to make a decision as to what we need to do for the type of disaster that we've just had.
Well, and it should help alleviate the fear created by the prior verbiage to the citizens who don't understand what we're asking them to do.
Exactly.
So
okay. So the last one, and I don't think that there were any changes, but the last goal is community engagement and partnership. So outreach and engagement relative to conservation and coastal management, and also the different types of partnerships that would be implementing and funding partners. So this, what I'm going to talk about now, just very quickly, are the other elements that were touched by the evaluation and appraisal process. Transportation, infrastructure, intergovernmental coordination, and capital improvements, starting with transportation. This one was to acknowledge US 19 as a facility on the strategic intermodal system in coordination with the adjacent local governments and the agencies relative to level of service on US 19. Adding a policy regarding recreational traffic in the transportation element. So that essentially accomplishes that state level requirement. Under the infrastructure element, this one was to reduce the city's potable water level of service standard from 105 gallons per capita per day to 96 gallons per capita per day, based on more of a updated demand usage data. The next one just describes the required water supply facilities work plan, showing that it's done for at least a 10-year period, and that it corresponds with the update of the Southwest Florida Water Management District water supply, regional water supply plan, and that mentions the statute that's applicable. This is intergovernmental coordination. There's a few of these related to this. There was a requirement to remove voluntary dispute resolution processes to replace that with mandatory dispute resolution processes. And these are the additional policies that were also revised to reflect that. And it also indicates that Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council does provide a forum for mediation for local governments that might find themselves in conflict with others. The capital improvements element, this one was to just update 9J5 Florida Administrative Code no longer exists, so that's just a housekeeping. This is a level of service standards policy that lists all of the city's level of service standards, so we updated the potable water, as I mentioned previously. And the last one is the concurrency management system. Just doing a little bit of housekeeping on that. Doesn't really. Oh, the main thing was to remove this financial feasibility requirement of the comprehensive plan, which is no longer required. I don't think that, I'm thinking it says the schedule should be updated annually through, that must have, it's been a while since I did this one, but I think that is no longer a requirement, which is why I struck it. I'll check on that. Does anybody have any questions for me before you get into your deliberation?
No.
Thank you for your thoroughness.
Oh, you're welcome. I love comprehensive planning. So
We couldn't tell.
Discussions, we're going to start. Mike, can we start?
I think she's done a really good job of wrapping up our discussions up to this point. Barring those couple of quick changes, it looks to me like we've encapsulated the few public comments that we've had, and comments from staff. I'm happy with where we ended up on this. I think it gives us a good vision of, at least for the foreseeable future. We know we can amend this later if things change. We know we have a lot of development coming in potentially, but we also have a lot of climate change coming in. So I think this encapsulates a lot of pieces of that, and gives us a good framework for helping the city build zoning and ordinances that will help us grow intelligently.
Yeah, I'm happy with the updated version of all of this. I guess I want I've asked this before. I just want to hear it again. That wherever it says support and promote and encourage and stuff, that doesn't mean shall or will.
that's correct.
I'm correct about
It's
that, right?
aspirational.
Okay.
Perfect. Ms. Lori? I commend you. It's a lot of work, but it's
Thank you.
where we need it to be.
So what I need is a vote on recommending the ordinance with all the changes that were shown today to go to council. You have the original ordinance in your packet. I have not made any changes. I didn't want to change it and then change it again.
Yeah, I think the only change was policy 3.2.5 regarding the business tax receipt. That's the only
They're
change.
striking that piece at all.
Striking that last sentence.
So if someone can make a motion and we'll take this to council.
Do we need to be specific about that, or
You
just
can
say
say,
changes with changes
Recommended with the
discussed?
changes noted,
Okay.
and we'll know what that means, and the record shows that.
I move that we accept the comprehensive plan with the changes addressed today, and that we forward this to council for approval.
Have a second?
Second.
I think Lori beat you by just that much, Randy.
She's quick.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's it, right? Do I have any other motions?
Move that we adjourn.
Okay. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.